Most people look at their phones and assume that an invisible, flawless web of connectivity just magically exists in the air around them, completely oblivious to the intense, mathematically ruthless engineering that keeps their digital lives from going dark. My name is Elena, and for over 15 years in the telecommunications sector, I operated as a lead RF network engineer, directly managing the massive, metropolitan infrastructure of 3G, 4G, and 5G cellular networks. My daily reality wasn't dealing with simple office routers. I was orchestrating a highly complex, multi-million-dollar grid of advanced hardware, meticulously configuring heavy-duty transmission equipment from manufacturers like Huawei and Nokia to ensure a flawless signal-to-noise ratio across an entire sprawling city. Keeping a massive mobile network stable isn't just a primitive matter of cranking up the antenna's volume to its maximum setting. It is an incredibly delicate, unforgiving balance of physics and radio frequency math. If you indiscriminately increase the transmission power of a cell tower, the electromagnetic waves don't just magically reach further into the dead zones. They violently collide with the signals from neighboring towers, causing immediate destructive interference where the hardware is literally screaming over itself to the point of a total digital blackout. It is a flawlessly tuned ecosystem designed to push data at the absolute edge of physical capability without triggering a catastrophic thermal overload in the highly sensitive power amplifiers. But the greatest threat to a multi-million-dollar metropolitan telecom grid isn't a massive storm or a physical hardware failure. It is an arrogant executive who fundamentally believes that the immutable laws of radio frequency physics are just annoying technical excuses standing in the way of his new regional marketing campaign. Keep watching, hit that subscribe button, and welcome back to Scars and Silk. Today, I am going to show you exactly what happens when a toxic VP of expansion forces you to violently overpower your transmission hardware, and you simply step back and let the unyielding laws of signal interference plunge his entire metropolitan market into total, absolute darkness. The absolute disruption to our meticulously balanced radio frequency ecosystem began the exact moment corporate brought in Julian as the new VP of network expansion. Julian wasn't an engineer, and he certainly didn't possess the technical capacity to understand the complex realities of managing heavy-duty transmission equipment. He was a pure marketing executive whose entire multi-million-dollar bonus structure was directly tied to aggressively launching an overarching, largest regional coverage, advertising campaign. When he reviewed the metropolitan coverage maps I had spent months physically calibrating, he didn't see a perfectly optimized cellular grid operating at the exact threshold of signal integrity and physical safety. Instead, he saw what he completely misunderstood as intentional dead zones and weak spots holding back the company's market dominance. He fundamentally could not grasp why I couldn't simply access the network management terminal and aggressively crank up the transmission power on our existing Huawei and Nokia towers to instantly blanket the entire city in a flawless 5G signal. In his arrogant, strictly numbers-obsessed mind, the carefully calculated signal-to-noise ratios and the strict thermal limits on the power amplifiers weren't critical safety mechanisms preventing total network interference and hardware destruction. They were just overly conservative engineering suggestions that were actively hindering his aggressive expansion goals. Instead of authorizing the necessary capital expenditure required to legally and physically build new cell sites to properly fill the coverage gaps, he looked at a beautifully orchestrated telecommunications grid and decided that my strict adherence to basic radio frequency physics was just a cowardly excuse for not pushing the network's hardware to its absolute, raw limit. Julian officially summoned me into his corner office and handed down his absolute, non-negotiable mandate. He demanded that I immediately access the central management terminal and remotely crank the transmission power on every single remote radio head across our entire metropolitan grid to its absolute maximum setting. I calmly stood my ground and tried to explain the completely unforgiving reality of radio frequency engineering to a man whose entire career was built on marketing slogans. I explicitly warned him that violently overpowering the hardware wouldn't magically expand our coverage map. It would immediately create a catastrophic wave of destructive signal interference. instantly crushing our signal-to-noise ratio down to absolute zero and rendering the entire network completely unusable. I went even further, detailing how forcefully pushing that much raw voltage through the system would strip away the built-in thermal protections, mathematically guaranteeing that the highly sensitive power amplifiers inside our expensive Huawei and Nokia towers would physically overheat and literally melt down hundreds of feet in the air. Julian simply scoffed at my technical warnings, aggressively accused me of being a rigid, uncooperative engineer who was deliberately hiding the network's true transmission capacity just to sabotage his new regional advertising campaign, and gave me a direct, undeniable ultimatum to completely strip away the software safety locks and aggressively apply maximum gain across the entire city by the end of the day. I completely refused to waste my breath arguing against the fundamental laws of radiofrequency physics with a marketing executive who prioritized advertising campaigns over basic network stability. Instead, I calmly opened my laptop, brought up a blank document, and meticulously drafted a formal signal overload and infrastructure destruction risk acknowledgment. I used explicit, mathematically undeniable language to document exactly what would happen when we bypass the transmission limits, clearly stating that forcing the remote radio heads beyond their physical capacity would guarantee a catastrophic cascade interference failure and create an immediate risk of physically melting the internal power amplifiers on our towers hundreds of feet in the air. I printed the document out, walked it directly into Julian's corner office, and calmly informed him that I would not execute the reckless power override script from the central management terminal unless he formally signed his name, legally assuming absolute financial and operational responsibility for the mathematically guaranteed destruction of our metropolitan grid. Julian actually laughed in my face, aggressively snatched the pen out of my hand, and called me a cowardly, overly protective engineer who was treating his massive telecommunications network like a fragile toy. He arrogantly signed his name at the bottom of the page, fully convinced he was about to mastermind a record-breaking coverage map, and aggressively ordered me to execute the bypass immediately. So, I walked back to my terminal, completely disabled the software safety locks on our Huawei and Nokia hardware, and aggressively pushed his doomed, overpowered parameters directly to every single transmission tower in the city. I want to pause the story right here to talk to every brilliant female engineer dealing with dangerously arrogant management. Have you ever had a toxic executive force you to push a system you knew with absolute certainty was going to literally burn itself out? Go down to the comments right now and drop a satellite antenna or a lightning bolt high voltage emoji if you know the absolute best defense against corporate greed is getting their reckless mandates signed in permanent ink. And make sure you hit that subscribe button to join the Scars and Silk network, because you absolutely need to see exactly what happens when the unyielding laws of electromagnetism finally catch up to his overpowered coverage map. Back to the story. Julian got his reckless signal mandate, the executive board praised his aggressive new marketing strategy, and I sat back at my terminal, fully aware that we had just strapped a massive, invisible time bomb directly to thousands of high-precision antennas. I calmly logged into the central network management terminal, deliberately bypassed the core engineering safety protocols, and ruthlessly executed the master script that instantly stripped away the transmission limits on thousands of Nokia and Huawei antennas across the entire metropolitan grid. For the first terrifying hour, the raw, unfiltered surge of electromagnetic power actually seemed like a massive success, as the digital coverage maps inside Julian's corner office suddenly flared a brilliant, uninterrupted green, prompting him to loudly parade around the executive floor, arrogantly boasting that he had single-handedly solved our infrastructure problems and openly mocking my previous technical warnings. But while he was busy popping champagne over his deeply flawed marketing metrics, an invisible, mathematically inevitable disaster was rapidly brewing in the airspace high above the city. Because the override script had explicitly forced every single remote radio head to transmit at its absolute maximum physical capacity, the localized cells were no longer handing off data connections smoothly. Instead, They were aggressively blasting their frequencies directly into each other's sectors, causing the electromagnetic waves to violently collide in midair. The massive, unregulated surge in raw transmission power instantly obliterated our carefully balanced signal-to-noise ratio, flooding the entire 4G and 5G spectrum with a catastrophic wall of completely unreadable digital static. While Julian's dashboard falsely displayed a flawless, citywide 5G signal, down on the ground, the mobile devices of millions of users were suddenly trapped in a chaotic, deafening crossfire of competing frequencies, desperately trying to decode a totally corrupted data stream as the unforgiving laws of radiofrequency physics quietly prepared to completely collapse his entire record-breaking network. The inevitable infrastructural disaster finally struck just as the city hit its peak afternoon traffic, exactly as the immutable laws of radiofrequency physics dictated. Millions of mobile devices across the metropolitan area suddenly found themselves trapped in a massive electromagnetic crossfire, while their screens falsely displayed full 5G signal bars due to the raw, unregulated power output. The catastrophic destructive interference caused the actual data transfer rates to violently plummet to absolute zero, meaning absolutely nothing would load, send, or connect. But the silent digital blackout was only the beginning of the nightmare, because high above the city's skyline, the physical hardware was rapidly losing its desperate battle against the extreme voltage. By forcing the system to broadcast at maximum capacity without the critical software safety locks, the highly sensitive power amplifiers inside hundreds of our expensive Huawei and Nokia remote radio heads severely exceeded their safe operating temperatures. Unable to digitally throttle themselves, the heavy-duty transmission equipment began to violently overheat, literally cooking the internal circuitry under the relentless strain. A terrifying cascade of red critical failure alarms suddenly flooded my central monitoring terminal as tower after tower systematically triggered hard thermal shutdowns to prevent catching fire, while dozens of others suffered catastrophic physical burnouts and completely died. In less than 45 minutes, Julian's arrogant, record-breaking coverage map violently collapsed into a massive sea of dead sectors, plunging half the entire city into a total unprecedented communications blackout simply because he thought he could outsmart the fundamental limits of electromagnetic physics with a corporate marketing strategy. With the entire metropolitan network completely paralyzed and the executive board in a state of absolute, blind panic, Julian desperately tried to save his career by loudly claiming to the emergency response team that a sudden, unpredictable software glitch in the Huawei and Nokia hardware had caused the regional blackout. I completely ignored his frantic, pathetic attempts to shift the blame, bypassed him entirely, and walked straight into the emergency crisis meeting that had just been convened with the terrified senior partners. I didn't utter a single word in my own defense. I simply connected my laptop to the main projector and illuminated the high-definition scan of the Signal Overload and Infrastructure Destruction Risk Acknowledgment that Julian had arrogantly signed just hours earlier. The massive screen perfectly highlighted his signature directly beneath the explicit, non-negotiable clauses detailing his absolute orders to violently bypass the transmission limits, ignore the thermal warnings, and systematically overpower the network into a mathematically guaranteed physical and digital collapse. It completely destroyed his desperate narrative about a software bug, exposing the undeniable proof that his blind, arrogant obsession with a cheap regional marketing campaign had intentionally triggered the massive telecommunications disaster. The entire executive boardroom went deathly silent as the reality of his gross operational negligence washed over the senior partners. Before the CEO could even fully process the devastating document, I calmly slid my company badge and a formal letter of resignation across the massive glass table, announcing that I was leaving the company effective immediately to launch my own elite RF engineering firm. However, because their entire metropolitan infrastructure was now completely dead and shedding millions of dollars by the minute, I handed the senior partners a non-negotiable proposal for a $3 million emergency consulting fee to urgently recalibrate the entire radio frequency spectrum and physically oversee the procurement and installation of hundreds of new power amplifiers for the burned-out cell towers. Julian was instantly terminated for cause, publicly escorted out of the building by corporate security, and the partners authorized my exorbitant consulting fee on the spot. I spent the next year meticulously rebuilding the exact physical infrastructure I had explicitly warned him not to destroy, entirely on my own terms and at exponentially more than my original salary. To every brilliant woman engineering the complex invisible web of the modern world, your true power isn't just in balancing the signal spectrum. It is in knowing exactly when to step back and let an arrogant executive literally burn his own network to the ground. If you know your worth in the telecommunications world, go down to the comments right now and drop a cell tower Tokyo Tower or a signal antenna bars emoji so I know you are watching. And make sure you hit that subscribe button to join the Scars and Silk Empire. Protect your network infrastructure, get every single catastrophic transmission mandate in writing, and never rebuild a melted telecom grid for free.